Welcome to Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. Today I'm going to show you how to prune your brand new tomato plant. Alright, this is a quick and dirty how-to video. We're going to take a look at how to prune these tomato plants once you've got them in the ground and they're getting really, well, they're growing really well. Look how lush this plant is. It's got growth everywhere. I'm going to talk about different ways that you can prune or not, and we're going to put these in a cage. So come along, I'll show you. Okay, when you're talking about pruning in tomato plants, first there's some information you have to know up front. You've got to know whether you've got a determinate or an indeterminate tomato plant. Now I've got one of each here. These are the tomatoes that have been potted up by me into these little cups. Determinate and indeterminate, what does it mean? Well, an indeterminate means that it has indeterminate growth. It's not determined beforehand in its genetic code how far it's going to grow and stop. Indeterminates will keep on and keep on growing and growing, and they will grow as perennials if you have the right climate. These plants will just keep on going, and you'll have to keep them under control. And they'll keep producing if the temperatures are right, and they won't stop. This is an indeterminate tomato plant. This one is a determinate tomato plant. It's got a D there. I made sure I knew which was which, because you treat these different. Determinates, you don't even have to prune them. You can just let them grow. They're often called bush types, and they grow to a certain height, a certain size. They set a certain amount of fruit, and once they've done that, they stop. They're done. It's a predetermined growth habit. So if you've got determinants, stick them in a big pot somewhere and just let them go. That's what I'm going to do. But with an indeterminate, these plants will just keep growing and keep growing and keep growing. And if you've ever grown tomatoes and just let them sprawl, you know they can be a great mess. Well, I've got a bunch of indeterminates that are in the ground, and they're great messes, so let's go clean them up. Now I hope you can see that this plant is just a big mess in here. We've got branches everywhere. We've got branches aiming down, pointing to the ground. There are several ways you could prune an indeterminate tomato plant. You can prune one single vine and let it grow up one stalk. That would mean coming out and taking away all the suckers and all the leafy branches that are not fruiting branches. And you can tell the difference. Fruiting branches are the ones that have these flowers on them, obviously. Every single sucker that grows out of the crotch of a branch, a leafy branch, and the main stem can become a whole new main stem, or a whole new plant, essentially. If you want to go with single vine, then you want to come in and clean out all this foliage down here and all the suckers that are coming up. And so I'm going to look in here. I don't think I can get a good view for you, but what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to do some kind of trimming of these leaves, because you don't want tomatoes touching the ground. Tomatoes that touch the ground are prone to pick up spores from the soil and get diseases. If I could get my trimmers to open, we'd be in business. So I'm just going to come in and start clearing out down here all these branches that are touching the ground so I can see what I'm doing. I don't need these low branches. I want airflow, and I want, that's a sucker I don't need. I'm going to try to keep this to at least one, maybe two main growing vines. Don't worry, your plant is not going to die if you prune it. I'm just cleaning out the bottom here so that I can see my main stalk here, my main branch. And so now I've got about 10 inches of space here that when I put my cage on this to hold it up, it'll keep all these leaves off the ground. Now you see, let me bring you where you can, let me turn it where you can see. This was my main vine. I have a leafy branch here, it's just leaves. I have another main branch here, and here is some fruiting branches. We're going to leave those behind, but I'm going to choose this one and this one to be my main growing vines, and I'll maybe get a third one. But I'm just going to basically put this in a cage and keep it nice and open. If you get too much foliage and it's too dense, just come and give your tomato plant a haircut. You want to keep all this out, away from the bottom of your plant, so it will be nice and clean down here. You don't want a bunch of soil splashing up on the leaves. And this thing will be as tall as I am by the end of the growing season. So don't be afraid to trim your tomatoes. They respond really well to it. So once again, we're going to choose 1 or 2 main vines to keep growing, and we're going to snip everything else out. I don't know about this one. Can you see this mess over here? Look at this. We've got all kinds of vines down in there. All right, let's start snipping. It's going to look like major surgery, but, well, that's what it is. But you can see these plants haven't been out here that long, and they're already so vigorous that they can stand a good deep trim like this. Again, I'm opening up the main vine, the trunk, so to speak, by taking off all this growth and taking off some of this leafy growth that aims downward toward the ground. We don't want that near the ground. And when we put a cage on this, I will have 2. I'll have a main stem that splits right here into 2. I'm going to take that one out because I don't want a 3rd main vine. There we go. And we'll just keep these. Let's take that one off too because it's pointing down. That's about half of the plant. Once we put this in a cage, it'll have its own support. Well, that's all you have to know. Now, once again, you can trellis these. You can put them on a string with clamps. You can tie them to a pole. You can put them in a tomato cage. It's just they're going to need support. These tomatoes are kind of flimsy out here in the wind, and you want to be able to see what you're doing and see how things are going and how things are growing. And I can see I've got plenty of fruit coming in already, and these tomato plants will be nice and healthy. Let me put a cage on these. Now, ideally, you'd want to get these cages on these tomato plants earlier, because now I got to stuff them through these. I got to stuff them through these rings. But whatever, you know, you do what you can. There we go. Now we'll just gently guide these things to grow inside of the cage. Bring these branches in here. And now we have a sturdy, stable tomato plant. I might need to trim that. Let's trim that. I don't want that branch touching the ground. Off you go. Make your cuts close to the main. You know, don't cut halfway if you don't have to. Don't cut halfway down a stem if you don't have to. It's easier for the plant to heal if you cut it at a junction. But if you do have to, like if you've got leaves touching the ground like on that one, go for it. Like I said, tomato plants are resilient. All right, clean this one up too. Get it on a cage. The wind has really whipped these around. We had a huge storm the other night, and these poor guys were out here just rocking back and forth, hitting the ground. Again, most everything is coming off of this main vine down here beneath about 10 inches. Most everything's coming off. That's pretty good. Snip that so it doesn't touch the ground. It's more important if you have bare soil or mulch. With this weed cloth, it's not as much of an issue as, but I do see some soil that's up on some of these leaves from my cut here. So now we'll just put a cage on this. Now, I like cages. You could trellis them. I've done Florida weaves. I've done string trellises. But I like cages because they give me kind of a goal height, right? Once it gets about this high, I don't want it any higher. I don't want the thing getting out of control. And the cage is sufficient to support a tomato plant that high. I like the cages because it gives me some control over things. They're not too unwieldy. You know, some trellis systems can be pretty tough to put in. And I have used trellis systems that are complicated. I've also used a string hanging from a crossbar as a trellis. Well, I hit something hard there. All right, now this guy will get a little taller and will support itself in this cage. I've got a long one over here that needs to go. Well, this is what we want. We want this tomato plant to be a little bit higher than this tomato cage. Well, necessarily this is going to be a short video because that's all there is to it. And yeah, I'm going to continue and do the rest of mine, and thank you for joining me on Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. I hope that you enjoy our content. If you'd like to learn how to grow tomatoes, subscribe to our channel. I've got all kinds of lessons on it. Hey, thanks. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.